My uncle left his fortune to the nephew who could prove he deserved it most, so I eliminated my cousins one by one. Growing up, my uncle was always the mysterious figure at family gatherings who wore expensive suits and never talked about what he did for work. He lived in this massive house on the hill that overlooked our entire town, and whenever we visited, I felt like I was stepping into another world entirely. The man never married, never had kids of his own, but he watched all of us nephews with these calculating eyes that made me wonder what he was really thinking about behind that quiet smile. When I turned 18, he pulled me aside during Christmas dinner and told me something that would change everything. He said he had been watching all five of us boys grow up, studying our characters, our ambitions, our flaws, and that when the time came, his entire fortune would go to whichever nephew could prove they deserved it most. The way he said it made my skin crawl, but the promise of inheriting millions was too tempting to ignore completely. My cousins and I had always been competitive, but this announcement turned our rivalry into something much darker and more serious than childhood games. We started treating every family gathering like a performance, trying to impress our uncle while simultaneously undermining each other in subtle ways that the adults never seemed to notice or care about. The first cousin I decided to focus on was the one everyone called the Golden Boy, because he excelled at everything from sports to academics. He had this perfect life mapped out with college scholarships and a bright future that made everyone proud. I knew I had to be smart about this, so I started small by creating fake social media accounts and spreading rumors about him at school that slowly damaged his reputation. The beauty of social media is that once something goes viral, it takes on a life of its own, and people stop questioning whether the original story was even true. I planted seeds about him cheating on tests, bullying younger students, and having substance abuse problems that seemed minor at first but grew into a massive scandal that destroyed his college prospects. Watching him fall apart was both satisfying and terrifying, because I realized how easily a person's entire future could be demolished, with just the right pressure applied at the right moments. His parents spent thousands on legal fees trying to clear his name, but the damage was already done, and he ended up dropping out of high school entirely. My second cousin was the artistic one who spent all his time painting and writing poetry that adults always praised as brilliant and mature beyond his years. Everyone expected him to become some famous artist or writer, which made him a serious threat to my inheritance plans. I decided to take a different approach with him and started subtly encouraging his worst habits instead of trying to destroy his reputation outright. He had always been a bit of a perfectionist who would throw away entire paintings if they didn't meet his impossibly high standards. I began leaving anonymous notes in his locker and around his workspace that criticized his work in very specific ways that targeted his deepest insecurities about his artistic abilities. The psychological pressure I applied was relentless, but carefully disguised as constructive criticism from concerned admirers who wanted to help him improve. I studied his work patterns and personality so thoroughly that I knew exactly which buttons to push to send him spiraling into creative blocks that lasted for months at a time. Eventually, he stopped creating altogether and spent most of his time in his room, convinced that he had no real talent and that everyone had been lying to him about his abilities. The transformation from confident artist to self-doubting recluse took almost 2 years, but it was worth it to see him remove himself from the competition entirely. My third cousin was the athlete who seemed destined for professional sports, with his natural talent and dedication to training. He spent hours every day at the gym or on the field, and coaches from major universities were already scouting him before he even finished his sophomore year of high school. I knew I couldn't compete with his physical abilities, so I had to find another way to level the playing field. I started researching performance-enhancing substances and figured out how to plant them in his gym bag during team practices. The first time, I made sure it looked like an accident, like maybe someone else's supplements had fallen out of their bag and gotten mixed up with his stuff. But I kept escalating the situation until it looked like he was actively using banned substances to gain an unfair advantage. When the school conducted random drug tests, they found traces of substances that he had never actually taken, but the evidence was overwhelming enough to get him kicked off the team permanently. His athletic career was over before it really began, and all those college scouts disappeared faster than I had expected them to. The guilt hit me harder with this cousin than the others because he had always been genuinely kind to me, but I pushed those feelings aside and reminded myself that only one of us could inherit our uncle's fortune. I told myself that he would thank me later when he found some other path in life that made him equally happy and successful. My fourth cousin was the social butterfly who effortlessly made friends wherever he went, and had this natural charisma that made adults trust him immediately. He was the type of person who could walk into any room and within minutes have everyone laughing and hanging on his every word. I knew his strength was also his weakness, because his entire identity was built around being liked by others. I created an elaborate scheme to make it look like he had been spreading gossip and betraying confidences among his friend groups. I would listen in on conversations, memorize personal secrets, and then make sure those secrets got back to the wrong people in ways that pointed directly back to him as the source. The social destruction was brutal to watch because his friends turned on him one by one, and he couldn't figure out why everyone suddenly seemed to hate him. He kept trying to explain that he hadn't said those things, but the evidence was so carefully planted that nobody believed his denials. Within 6 months, he went from being the most popular kid in school to eating lunch alone in the library, and his personality completely changed as he became suspicious and paranoid about everyone around him. The transformation broke something inside him that I don't think ever fully healed, even years later. By the time I had systematically destroyed all four of my cousin's prospects, I felt like I had won the competition before it had even officially begun. My uncle continued to watch all of us at family gatherings, but I was the only one who still seemed to have any real potential for success in life. The others had all fallen into various states of depression, anxiety, or social isolation that made them seem like completely different people from the confident kids they had been just a few years earlier. I felt terrible about what I had done to them, but I also felt proud of my strategic thinking and ability to execute complex plans over long periods of time. When my uncle finally died, I expected to inherit everything as the last nephew standing, but his will contained a twist that I never saw coming. He left his entire fortune to a charity that helped young people recover from trauma and rebuild their lives after experiencing major setbacks. The lawyer explained that my uncle had known exactly what I was doing to my cousins the entire time, and that his final act was to teach me a lesson about the consequences of destroying others for personal gain. He had been testing whether any of us would choose to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. The will included detailed documentation of every scheme I had executed, every lie I had told, and every life I had damaged in pursuit of money that was never really going to be mine. My uncle had hired private investigators to track my activities and gather evidence that could be used against me if necessary. But the most devastating part was learning that he had also left individual trust funds for each of my cousins to help them recover from the trauma I had caused them. He had planned for their rehabilitation from the very beginning, knowing that they would need professional help to overcome what I had done to them. Reading through his final letter to me was like looking into a mirror that showed me exactly who I had become, and I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. He wrote about how disappointed he was in my choices, and how much potential I had wasted by focusing on destruction instead of creation. The legal implications of his documentation were serious enough that I had to hire a lawyer to make sure I wouldn't face criminal charges for some of the things I had done to my cousins. The statute of limitations protected me from most consequences, but my reputation in our small town was completely destroyed once word got out about what I had done. My cousins slowly began to rebuild their lives with the help of the trust funds and professional support that my uncle had arranged for them. Some of them forgave me eventually, but others never spoke to me again, and I couldn't blame them for cutting me out of their lives entirely. The golden boy went back to school, and eventually became a teacher who specialized in helping students overcome academic challenges and social difficulties. The artist started creating again, and had his first gallery showing 5 years after my uncle's death. The athlete found a career in sports medicine, and worked with young people recovering from injuries. The social butterfly became a counselor who helped teenagers navigate bullying and social trauma, turning his own painful experiences into a way to help others who were going through similar struggles. Watching all of them succeed despite what I had done to them was both inspiring and heartbreaking. I spent years trying to figure out how to make amends for the damage I had caused, but some things can't be undone no matter how much you want to take them back. The relationships I had destroyed, the trust I had broken, and the pain I had caused were permanent scars that would never fully heal. The irony wasn't lost on me that by trying to prove I deserved my uncle's fortune more than anyone else, I had actually proven that I deserved it less than any of them. My cousins had shown resilience, forgiveness, and the ability to rebuild their lives in positive ways, while I had shown only selfishness and cruelty. Looking back now, I realize that my uncle's real test wasn't about proving who deserved his money the most, but about revealing who we truly were when faced with temptation and competition. I had failed that test spectacularly, and the consequences followed me for the rest of my life. The worst part was knowing that I had destroyed my family relationships for absolutely nothing, and that my actions had created a ripple effect of pain that extended far beyond just my cousins. Their parents, siblings, and friends had all been affected by the chaos I had created in pursuit of an inheritance that was never really available.